Publius Cornelius Scipio Africanus was one of the greatest generals not only in Roman, but in all of ancient history. He had earned eternal glory and fame with his victories over the Carthaginians. His crowning achievement was the triumph of Hannibal himself, which earned Scipio his cognomen Africanus. His strategic thinking and tactical genius made him a formidable opponent for any general of antiquity. However, there is one category in which he lags behind his peers, and that is good depictions. The later great Roman generals like Pompey and Caesar were living during the golden age of Roman sculpture, so now we have very detailed busts which give us a good idea of their appearance. Even the great enemies of Rome like Pyrrhus and Hannibal get some nice sculptures with unique features. But when you Google what Scipio looked like, you are likely to get an image of a completely bald middle-aged man with a double chin. This contrasts sharply with what Scipio looked like according to the history books. Here's what Livy writes about him. Scipio had great natural dignity, long hair added charm, as did a general appearance not due to studied elegance, but truly masculine and soldierly. Scipio's long hair is often brought up in histories because it was going against the accepted customs of the time. Most Roman men of the age had short haircuts, and Scipio's choice to let his hair grow was seen as a rebellious fashion statement. So how come this dashing, long-haired man became a bold, middle-aged chubster? That's because he didn't have access to today's sponsor Manscaped. Sorry, this video isn't sponsored by anyone. I just had to make this joke. In reality, we don't have any clear indication that Scipio was ever bald. Sure, we can't discount the possibility that he lost his hair later in life, but there are no literary sources to back it up. But why then are these bald busts associated with the great Roman general? The first mention of one of these bald heads comes from the early 17th century. Ioannis Faber mentions a head kept in the Palazzo Speliosi and says that it portrays Scipio Africanus. But the first time that this theory had been fully argued was in the early 19th century. An Italian antiquarian called Ennio Quirino Visconti had presented the following arguments in his book on Roman iconography. First, there is a distinguishing mark indented slightly back of the statue's forehead. The mark isn't present on every bust, but you can see its two crossed lines on some pictures. Visconti argued that this was a scar which Scipio received when he saved his father at the Battle of Ticinus, early on in the Second Punic War. This assumption is highly suspect for a number of reasons. It is not firmly established that it was Scipio himself who saved his father. It may have been a Ligurian slave of their family, and young Scipio's involvement in the incident could be a later embellishment. Secondly, Polybius, Livy, and Valerius Maximus all say that it was the father who's been wounded, not young Scipio himself. The only source that speaks about Scipio's wounds is Servius in the 4th century AD. And of course, being wounded in battle does not automatically identify you with a marble bust that has a mark on the head. The second argument of Visconti is the inscription upon the Capitoline bust, which reads P. Cor Scipio AFR. This sounds like strong evidence, but unfortunately the inscription is fake. Late 19th century antiquarians examined it and concluded that it was added sometime in the 18th century. This is supported by the fact that the earlier descriptions of the bust do not mention it at all. The next argument is that one of the bald heads was found in Liternum, a small town in Campania where Scipio spent his last years. Livy writes that the people of Liternum have erected a monument in honor of Scipio, so Visconti suggests that this bald head may have belonged to it. This doesn't sound conclusive to me. After all, Liternum probably had more than one statue. Also, Livy, who had actually seen the original monument, gives completely different description of Scipio's appearance. The last two of Visconti's arguments are even flimsier than that. He presents a coin minted by one of Scipio's descendants, Gnaeus Cornelius Blasio. The coin's obverse has a helmeted head of a man who kinda sorta looks like one of the busts in question. We don't really have confirmation that the helmeted man is Scipio Africanus. It may as well be Mars or some other deity. But even if it was him, the face on the coin looks nothing like the double-chinned, thick-necked busts. It slightly resembles the gaunt man from another bust, but it sounds like Visconti hasn't decided which one of these busts is actually Scipio. Finally, there is a wall painting from Pompeii. Visconti suggests that it depicts the marriage festivities of Sophonisba and Messinissa, interrupted by Scipio. It's one of the famous stories from the Second Punic War. Sophonisba was a Carthaginian woman who held sway over the political landscape of North Africa through her great charisma. She and the Numidian king Massinissa were in love, but the Senate of Carthage ordered her to marry Syphax, the king of Macecile. After Syphax fell in battle, she was free to marry Massinissa, but Scipio feared she may turn him against the Romans and asked the king to leave her. Massinissa acquiesced, and Sophonisba, like a true Carthaginian princess, committed suicide while berating the man who had scorned her. Visconti argued that this fresco depicts this event, and the man you can partially see on the left is Cornelius Scipio. The depicted man has features similar to some of the busts, but it would be a stretch to assume that this was the general himself. No legend or history tells us that Scipio was present when Sophonisba drank poison, and the man in the picture doesn't wear any attire of a Roman general. This is also supposed to be a portrayal of a relatively young Scipio, at the time when he still had a full head of hair. And that's all that Visconti used to argue that all these bald guys are Scipio. As you can see, it's not very convincing. It becomes especially clear when you notice that these busts all depict men who look completely different, save for the lack of hair. Nevertheless, this theory became widely accepted. From the middle of the 19th century, these Scipio heads began popping out everywhere. A bunch of copies had been made to be sold to museums around the world. Scratching a crossmark on the bald statue's head automatically made it a Scipio, and increased its value by quite a lot. Also, do not let the armored torso fool you. If you see one of these Scipio-type busts, odds are that it is not antique, but a 19th century or later copy. But even those from which they were copied aren't fully ancient. Only the heads can be dated to the ancient Roman era. All of the torsos were added in the modern times, when Visconti's theory was already accepted. This fallacy is still alive today. Here is a similar bust that was sold at an auction just a month ago as Scipio Africanus. I have to admit that I myself have used some bald guy busts to portray Scipio because I didn't know better. And I am not alone in this. Here's Scipio from Rome Total War poster, already with receding hairline. But if all of these statues are not Scipio, then who are they exactly, and do we have any actual depictions of the great general? The identity of all these bald men remains uncertain. Historian Walter Dennison suggests that some of them may be priests of Isis. Notice that most of these Scipios aren't just bald, but have clean-shaven heads. This wasn't a popular custom among the Roman nobility, who generally left their balding heads as they were. However, shaving the head clean was common for the priests of some Egyptian deities. It would also explain the crossmark, which was used as a brand by the cult of Isis. When it comes to the actual portrayals of Scipio, our best candidate right now is this sculpture. Apart from that monument in Laternum, which had sadly been destroyed, we also know that a bust of Scipio Africanus was kept in the temple of Jupiter Capitolinus. Valerius Maximus writes that members of the Cornelian family brought it out and carried it in funeral processions. All of the ancient authors, including Livy and Silius Italicus, describe a man with full flowing hair. This bust, which was found near the Scipio family tomb, doesn't exactly have long hair, but at least it has some hair. So which depiction of Scipio do you think is the most realistic? Let me know in the comments and ask whatever questions you still have remaining. Thanks a lot for watching till the end, and I will see you in the next one.